Debate night is back. Tonight we are in Govan on the banks of the River Clyde in Glasgow. In the past, this was the centre of Clydeside shipbuilding, but since then the area has faced decline and deprivation. However, in recent years, it's seen investment and regeneration. Tonight, local voters from across the political spectrum have gathered here at Govan Town Hall to talk about what matters most to them. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is the show where the people get to ask the big questions, answering them on our panel this evening. The lead singer of Glasgow indie band Belle and Sebastian, Stuart Murdoch. Stuart recently published his semi-autobiographical novel detailing what life has been like living with ME for the past 30 years. Stuart's been a resident of Glasgow for the past 40 years and credits the city with providing never-ending inspiration for his work. From the Scottish Conservatives, Sandesh Gulhane is MSP for Glasgow and the party spokesperson for health and social care. Away from politics, Sandesh is a practising GP and continues to work one day a week in the NHS. Also with us tonight, journalist and broadcaster Catriona Stewart. Catriona is Vice Chair of Women in Journalism Scotland and was recently named Opinion Writer of the Year. She's worked for The Times, The Spectator and The Observer as well. From Scottish Labour, Paul O'Kane is MSP for West Scotland. The former Deputy Leader of East Renfrewshire Council, Paul is now Scottish Labour spokesperson for social justice, social security and equalities. And finally, Fulton MacGregor is SNP MSP for Coatbridge and Christon. Before being elected to Holyrood in 2016, Fulton spent 12 years as a social worker in South Lanarkshire. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome to our studio audience here in Govan as well. It's great to have you with us this evening. You can join in the discussion from home, wherever you happen to be tonight. BBCDN is the hashtag that you need on social media. And our podcast of this show is available for you to download straight after the broadcast. So let's get started. Our first question of the night here in Govan comes from David Houston. David, good evening.
Thanks. Given Tony Blair's recent comments on net zero not working, is this the beginning of the end of the Green Revolution?
Thank you, David. So Tony Blair has called for a radical reset of net zero policies, which he says are irrational and doomed to fail. Paul O'Kane, is this the beginning of the end of the Green Revolution?
Well, I think when you look behind the headlines in terms of Tony Blair's contribution in the debate in the last few days, he was actually talking about trying to expand things like carbon capture and looking at smaller reactors and trying to actually advance an agenda that is sustainable.
Well, he says current policies aren't working.
Well, look, I think what he was trying to point to is there are other areas that we could look at, I think, in more detail. But I think what's clear is there is a commitment from this UK Labour government to make sure that we do pursue a green agenda because it's important for the planet, but that we do that in a just way that ensures a just transition to that net zero future, but crucially that it builds the economy and we can create the jobs of the future. And that's what policies like GB Energy are all about. It's about setting up a publicly owned energy company that will invest in, for example, offshore and onshore wind, that will create jobs across communities in Scotland, and will invest right at the heart of this agenda. Because I do think it's important that we do those two things. One is invest for the future in terms of our planet, but also ensure that we have those jobs of the future.
So when he says net zero policies at the moment are irrational and doomed to fail, what's he talking about, do you think?
Well, I think we've had, a Conservative government for 14 years previously who I don't think have got this right at all and haven't invested in the proper places that I'm talking about. So making sure that things can be publicly owned, like GB Energy, as I've mentioned, but also looking at those technologies in terms of things like carbon capture. But also, I think, crucially, giving communities a stake in a lot of this agenda as well, with community-owned energy, upscaling, I think, the opportunities for that to happen as well. Because very often, many of these policies, and I'm happy to admit it, feel quite distant from people. And actually, I do think we need to give more communities a bigger stake, perhaps, in that green future as well.
Fulton MacGregor, last week the Scottish Government announced it was dropping its target of reducing car usage by 20% by the end of the decade. Is Tony Blair giving us a dose of realism here?
I don't think so. I think it is important to renew targets and look at targets as information emerges. And there's no point in having targets that aren't going to be met, but we do need to be ambitious. from my point of view, it can't be the end of the green revolution, as you said in your question. The stakes are far too high. If we don't do something to protect our planet, there won't be a planet to protect.
But you keep dropping targets because we keep missing the targets.
We all need to put our shoulder to the wheel to make this work. You're right, there have been targets have been changed, but it's better, I think, that the Scottish Government and other governments have ambitious targets that they try to achieve, and if they are not achieved, that they're scaled back slightly, but it starts from an ambitious point.
So are we setting targets that we know we're not going to meet? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think that is the case at the time, but I think what Tony Blair is actually saying is to reduce the ambition in the first place, and I think that is a wrong move. I think that we need to have ambitious targets if we're going to achieve this. And Scotland, as well as the UK, needs to play their part on a global scale here. But Paul mentioned just transition there, and I think that's a very important part of this too. But I would like to say that there's been no just transition for Grangemouth, which I think is an absolute appalling set of circumstances. So we do need a just transition, and for me it sounds like just now the Labour Party at UK level don't know what they're asking for. Are they going for a green revolution, or are they going for a just transition? Because they're not doing either very well.
Let's see what the audience think. Man in the glasses. Yeah.
I think we have to be careful that we're not losing sight of the fact that this is more than a political issue. I think the big energy providers, the multinationals, are significantly reducing the funding for renewable energy development and investment, and I think that's a huge factor, and we have to hold them to account for this change in direction. You know, from yes, committing to a green energy policy in their multinationals, and then now openly reversing out them. Now, what's changed? That's what the politicians need to ask, because it's the money that talks.
Thank you, thank you. Man on the end of the row, over here.
Fulton mentioned Grangemouth. Obviously, the Labour Party is saying the SNP's fault is shut. SNP is saying Westminster's fault is shut. Grangemouth is closing, unfortunately. And if that's the argument we want to have, is because why not go to court and find out who's got the power to save Grangemouth? Is it the UK government? Is it the Scottish government? Because they both can't be right. Net zero also. Nigel Farage keeps saying net zero is costing money. The Labour Party is saying wind energy is the cheapest energy to run. They both can't be right, but we need to know the truth. What is the truth? And no party is telling us the truth, I don't think. And why can Omega say the truth? Look, net zero is going to be X, Y, Z, it'll cost A, B, C. And we can work that out, then we can work the truth out. But right now, we're not told the truth. You all just pick wee bits in there, and we got to mix up and find out who's more believable, who's not. At the end of the day, we need to know the truth. If it has to go to court to find out who's telling the truth, let's go to court and find out.
So refining ceased, of course, yesterday at Grangemouth. Lady in the glasses in the middle here, in the white top, yes.
I recently attended the Housing Festival for Scotland, and the relevance to me is that the people that are staying on the islands of Scotland, the tenants that are staying on the islands of Scotland, those islands are producing more power than anywhere else, but those tenants are paying higher rates than anywhere else. What is the Scottish Government going to do to help those tenants?
Okay. Fiona, I'll let you come back in just a second. Sandesh, Gulhane, the question originally was, is this the beginning of the end of the green revolution? And the ultimate target, net zero by 2050 UK-wide, 2045 in Scotland, is that gone now as far as you're concerned?
I think we all agree in this room across the United Kingdom that we do need to move to greener energy. We're all in agreement about that. But it's not a just transition we need. We need an affordable transition. Gentleman at the back, you talked about telling the truth. Well, here's some truth. We will need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. Everyone in this room, you are wearing clothing that has come from oil. If you have nail polish on, that comes from oil. I'm a doctor. Most of the equipment I use comes from oil. So what we need to do is make sure we have energy security, which is not the SNP's presumption of stopping the North Sea, but actually making sure we have energy security and making sure that we secure our own supply. Because I don't trust the Saudi Arabian government, the Iranian government, the Russian government when it comes to taking their oil and gas. We need to have ours. In fact, it's 4 times cheaper to produce our own gas than it is to get it.
So do we just ditch all targets?
Well, the SNP have never met a single target. It's a very confusing answer from Fulton just there. They've never met a single target. The latest one about driving cars, a 20% reduction, Fiona Hislop's admitted they're nowhere near that. And the truth, I want to come to the truth. The SNP government here in Scotland is going to be charging you, the consumer. It's you that's going to be bearing the cost for it. So what we need to do is be honest about how much things are going to cost, and we need to have an affordable transition.
Okay, Fulton MacGregor, you're not being honest about this. What the cost is going to be to all these people of this change that's coming?
I think the government is being as honest as it can be at any one time. Obviously, the situation with climate targets does change. We've spoke about that already, and we need to review targets. But I'll go back to what I said in the first instance. It's better to have ambitious targets and make progress there than have low bar targets that are easier to meet, and everybody says, oh, you met that target, that's all fine, but you don't actually make an impact on climate change.
But the Scottish Government, the SNP, do this all the time. They have world-leading targets and we have world-leading strategy, and the delivery is very, very poor. And just to go back to Fulton's point on Grangemouth, you know, the SNP have known for 5 years about some of the intentions of Petro-Ineos. They have not said a word. It is only just in the last few months that we've heard this call for nationalisation, for example, from the SNP. You know, they've had the information, as had the Conservative government previously, and the reality is that we are where we are now. So what the Labour government has done is invested £200 million in that site in order to move that forward for the future that I'm talking about.
Let's go back to the question. Is the green revolution at an end? This man with the green tie down here. Yes.
I think it's going to be for the foreseeable future. I think, as a Conservative Member of Parliament here mentioned, he doesn't trust Iran or Saudi. I don't trust the UK or the Scottish Government. Fulton said there the government's as honest as we can be. That's quite a telling comment to make. I think ultimately people in this country are dying because they can't afford to heat their houses, and that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Man with the glasses. Here.
I'm a business owner, and we've just installed in the last few months solar panels all across the roof, and that came with a 50% deduction from our local authority, which was great. But then we're also getting battered as well, because in one hand, you know, we had enough cash to buy all that, to put those solar panels on, but for small businesses to then be hit with the national insurance and the living wage increase, because we don't pay anything less than the living wage, it becomes really, really challenging. You feel that you're getting battered from all angles at the moment. And to try and hit a net zero, it's almost like your own little government. You're saying that you're going to do this, you're saying that you're working towards it, but it's really, really tough. I'm not empathising with the government, but I think that these things have to change, because we have to change our priorities as a business, and I think that's probably the same as the government.
But do you not think that the government and public bodies need to change their priorities? Instead of asking all of you people to spend your money, why are public sector not achieving their net zero targets? Because solar power is cheaper. Solar power would be cheaper if all the hospitals bought solar panels, if all our public bodies had solar panels everywhere. That would bring the cost down for you.
So you're saying that's where the leadership has to come from?
The leadership needs to come from.
Okay. Catriona, Stewart.
We're talking about the economic impact of climate change. We've talked about pausing. We cannot pause. This is a climate emergency. There isn't time to hang about. And I think one of the issues is the sort of rhetoric that we're hearing from Sandesh. I completely understand that this is difficult, but we need politicians to be bringing the public along. Part of the reason that we're not hitting green targets is because people are being asked to make sacrifices.
Well, Kemi Badenoch says 2050 net zero is just impossible. We're never going to get there.
Yeah, and there's been shock at what Tony Blair has said in the past day, but actually he's not really deviated from his position when he was in government. He's always said that what is needed is for technological change. So his position has always been that we should still get to do the things that we've always been able to do. We should still lead the lives that we've always been able to lead.
Can we
but
do
technology would fix it. We're not at that point. But we do need people to be willing to make sacrifices. We need people to be willing to give up the cars, to install heat pumps. You talked about targets. Some of the climate targets have been met, but what is needed now is the more difficult things, like having people install heat pumps. There are lots of things that are being done that are not being done because there isn't the willing, and it's really, really hard to sell that when the economy is struggling, because the push will always be for economic growth over improvements to the climate. But we don't have time to hang about.
I'd love to hear from you tonight. If you're making these changes in the midst of doing it, Stuart, just a second. Man in the second row with the glasses. Yes, on you go.
I think the hypocrisy is stark, because when we have COP20 and people coming all over the world, coming in business classes and flights, to meet only to talk about green energy, I think the hypocrisy is stark. We don't trust the politicians, as you said earlier on, simply because what we tend to do is that we always say that you have to have renewable energies, but we never talk about that individually per capita, how we can actually reduce that. You can see outside, you have the Tesco's there, all the lights would be on throughout the night. All Tesco's will have hundreds of lights, all public bodies will have hundreds of lights. We never talk about that. It's something easy to do, something easy to legislate, but we never do that, do we? And we ask the poorer people to pay the most, because when you go for renewables, it will be the poorer who will be paying more. That's what the hypocrisy is.
Thank you. A man in the fourth row there. Yes.
You're talking about targets. Should the target not be that we produce so much electricity in this country that we don't need to pay for it?
Free electricity. Stuart Murdoch?
I think you've got a great point. Scotland is a powerhouse, or could be. Why are we generating all this electricity and our bills are going up, up, up? Like the chap there says, we can't afford to heat our homes. We produce all this wind power. We've got it. The capacity, it can keep going up. We've got as much wind as you want. Grangemouth could get changed into, they could bring all the power into Grangemouth, they could put it into hydrogen.
New wind farm just opened this week?
They could store it, the Berwick, yes. Yeah. They could store it as hydrogen power. Now, once you've got hydrogen, you can start to, we're using that in buses already. You can use that for your house, you can use it for ferries, aeroplanes either. There's no way that Grangemouth should be shut. That needs to continue. That was a balls up. They've known for 10 years that Grangemouth was going to run out. There should be a continuity there. But it's not, we shouldn't be negative about this. This has got to be done.
So is Tony Blair being negative in your view? Yes.
That was a shocker. I don't, why is he jumping on this? Why is he jumping on the reform bandwagon? I don't get it. We are moving forward. We have to move forward towards net zero. For the sake of my children, your children, all our children.
Man with the black top and the third row. Yeah, you there. On you go. Sorry.
Sandwick in Lewis and the Isle of Egg and Orkney are producing so much energy they don't know what to do with it, and it's all renewables. I think we should be celebrating what Scotland can do.
Which is a lot these days. And man with the beard on the far side there. Yes.
Talking about the end of the Green Revolution, but it never really got its legs up in the first place. Like, you're talking the tariffs for energy shot up before we could really start applying targets. Working class people can't afford to go and buy a new 30 grand electric vehicle, a heat pump, solar power system, everything else on top of that. Tony Blair's coming out and saying this against it because he's been making his money overseas doing talks for leadership for some of these companies that make all the money off the oil corporations. He's been benefiting from that. So it benefits him in the long run to be against it.
OK. Thank you. Your views from home on this. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Tonight, we are in Govan in Glasgow. Next week, we're going to be in Perth. The week after that, we're going to be in St Andrews for the first time ever. So if you'd like to come along and be part of the audience for those shows, go to the website bbc.co.uk/debate night, or you can scan the QR code as well on your screens. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Lewis Aird. Lewis, evening.
In a city which has seen so much sectarian violence and with recent controversies, should Kneecap be allowed to perform at Transmit Festival in July?
Thank you. First Minister John Swinney has called for rap group Kneecap to be axed from Scotland's biggest music festival after footage appeared which seemed to show them urging fans to kill an MP. Stuart Murdoch, as a musician, what do you think?
I've got the easy one. There should never be any violence. We should never be asking anybody to have an act of violence. There's no way. So we need to take this in context. The band has said you need to look at this in context.
They've also apologised.
Well, of course they've apologised now. Yes, they have apologised. This was many years ago. Actually, this was on stage in Belfast. I've seen the footage. It's not quite as heinous as, you know, if you take that quote, you think get these guys carted, these are BAMs. But they're not BAMs. I think, I'm a rock and roller. I sometimes say things on stage that I shouldn't say, and I regret. And I'll probably say some things right now that I'll regret later on. But a wee bit of context. They played a festival called Coachella in the States in California, and they're very pro-Palestinian, to a fault, I think, but they're very pro-Palestinian. And the remarks were picked up by the administration, shall we say, there. And that set things in motion for this footage that we see now that has been brought to the attention, rightly so, because we're debating it here. This is what, we're about free speech, we're debating it. So they are getting cancelled from certain promoters are waiting to see what these guys say and which way the land lies. But
well, there's three German concerts have cancelled them today. Eden Festivals cancelled them as well. Should Transmit cancel them?
I think Transmit should wait to see what the politicians are saying, but also I think you should consider the context. I think free speech is so important in this day and age. I think, honestly, these guys are mostly good guys. I've spoken to quite a lot of people. They say what they feel passionately. They said it's a fault here. There's no doubt in that. There should never be this sort of call for violence. But you can make up your mind yourself.
Catriona, Stewart?
I'm interested. Do you think they should be banned? Sorry, I'm just stealing your job.
We'll find out in just a second. Well, actually, let's go to, you asked the question. What do you think? Lewis?
Obviously, it's down to DF Concerts, they're the people. But it's John Swinney's comments that they should be banned. The land that they're playing on, Glasgow Green, obviously, Glasgow City Council area, they can decide. I see their stance on pro-Palestinian, I support that. But I think in the last 10 years, we've had 2 MPs murdered, and to make comments as strong as that on stage, I understand heat of the moment stuff. You're on stage, you say something silly.
But they've crossed the line as far as you're concerned.
That's incitement of violence, and I think mentioning free speech in the same conversation is an incitement of violence. They don't go hand in hand there.
Okay.
I think
Catriona, should politicians be getting involved in this?
Absolutely, of course. I can't see why they wouldn't get involved in this. It's a really important discussion, and it does involve politicians. Their line was, kill your local MP. That's absolutely a political issue, but I think they've made the situation really difficult for themselves by apologising, because they do have this very strong pro-Palestine message. That is what they were trying to get across, and they have made the cardinal mistake of becoming the story rather than getting their message across, rather than being a sort of campaigning force. They have really messed this one up, and I think by apologising, they've just put themselves into this really sort of difficult halfway situation. And I think Transmit will eventually cancel them. You think they will? But should they? I think they should. I think they've crossed a line here that there isn't any going back from.
Fulton MacGregor, former SNP Justice Secretary Kenny McCaskill has said this whole conversation is pointless and that they should be able to go ahead and perform, and the whole thing has been taken out of context. Is he wrong?
I think, like others, it's going to be a decision for Transmit to make. Obviously, when we first heard what had been said, and Stuart's right to say that they were historical remarks, when we first heard them, I think there was shock. Govan, as the young man at the front said as well, that there has been 2 MPs killed within recent times. I think that was a line that definitely shouldn't have been crossed, as well as perhaps comments about a terrorist group. However, in the days that followed, those initial shocks, which was when the First Minister made his comments, the group have come out and they have apologised for that and also explained their stance that, one, they do not support terrorism in any forum. So
does that change things?
And that they do not support violence against anybody. So I think
what they said.
I think that they have come out and said that. So I think now when people are making decisions on it, I think people need to make the decisions with all the information. Will Transmit cancel them? I think like Catriona, I think they probably will. But it is a decision for them. I disagree with others. I don't really think this is a decision for politicians. We have got a really good police force in this country who will make risk assessments.
Well, John Swinney said they should be dropped.
Yeah, and I've already said that I think the First Minister did make those comments when we first obviously heard about the footage, yeah, I think that they were the right comments for him to make.
OK, man with the cap in the second row. Yeah.
So John Swinney did call for Kneecap to be banned by Transmit. Should they be banned by Transmit? No, they shouldn't. The whole situation's indicative of a smear campaign against the group. These comments were made years ago, and it's all to distract from the statement that they made in the first place, that the United States are funding military action that's resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of children in Gaza. And that's what we should be speaking about.
So you don't believe they made those comments in the way that has been picked up?
I believe the comments are wrong, and I believe that the band have apologised for them. We've spoke about that already, but I think that the debate around that is a distraction from the real issue at hand that I've just discussed.
OK, thank you. Lady here, yes.
While I think their comments were wrong, I've got some sympathy with saying daft things in daft places. I do think there should be consequences. I think they should be able to come back from it sometime. But what about all those groups that issue songs that are openly misogynistic, that are never cancelled, never banned?
Thank you. Sandesh, Gulhane, musicians have always said controversial things. The Beatles faced calls to be cancelled over comparing themselves to God, being bigger than God. Should Transmit cancel this band?
Well, Lewis spoke about free speech, and that is very important. And the hardest time to support free speech is when you don't like what's being said. But having free speech does not allow me to incite racial hatred. It doesn't allow me to incite violence and murder. So the band has crossed a line. Now, I agree with the lady that spoke a little bit earlier. It doesn't mean that you can't come back from it. But there are consequences to saying these things, and it really does matter. When you have a public platform, what you say does matter. So people
what about
are allowed
apologising? They've apologised.
People are allowed to change their mind. Of course they are. But with everything being so fresh and with everything the way that it is, it's going to be very difficult for this band to go onto a stage and to be able to perform without taking away from Transmit. Now, it's not my decision. It is Transmit's decision about whether to cancel the band or not. But what I would say is they have crossed a line, and inciting violence against any group is wrong.
Right, lots of hands up in the audience on this. Lady in the very back row at the back. Yes.
Thank you. I think we live in a very, very informed age right now. It's very, very, as a musician or as a group, you have millions of followers, and what you say, you have to be very, very careful. You have followers that will take your word literally and could actually carry out whatever violence that you're asking for, which is very, very dangerous. We see what happened at the Capitol with Donald Trump a few years ago when he lost the election. So if you have ardent followers and they take your word literally, it's like saying that you are an authority in this issue, and you go ahead and say something like that. I do agree that there should be consequences, but also flipping the coin, what is the situation for Kneecap if they don't get cancelled at these festivals, at these music festivals? Are they even safe? You know, are we considering their own safety at the moment? So there are some people that are against what they've said, and because of that, violence could actually erupt if they were allowed to perform. So if they're not allowed to perform for now and allow the dust to settle, there is a way that they could come back from it.
Yeah, I think they are subject to a police investigation over the comments as well.
And that is the consequence of their actions.
Yeah, thank you. Paul O'Kane.
Well, look, I think it's very clear that people have very passionate views on geopolitical situations. You know, you can absolutely express your support for the Palestinian people and for Palestine, without, I think, calling for the support of Hezbollah, you know, who are a terrorist group and are proscribed in the United Kingdom. And I think that's what needs to happen is quite a large degree of self-reflection on the part of the band. Now, I'm not a particular fan of the band, more of a Belle and Sebastian guy than a Kneecap kind of guy. I do worry sometimes about the polarisation of issues, particularly, I think, in the context of Northern Ireland. And I say that as someone who holds Irish citizenship and is family from that area. You know, I think I'm always very much of the view that we need to come together, we need to persuade one another and respect our differences, and I do worry sometimes that we become quite polarised. And also, I have to say, in terms of what they said around violence and inciting violence towards MPs, all the politicians on the panel, I am quite sure in our inboxes get some pretty hairy stuff on a weekly basis. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, for sympathy or any other issue, but we have had 2 MPs in this country who have been murdered. And we do have to take very seriously our words, regardless of what station we're in public life and what we're doing. I think that does have a real consequence, and we need to be really, really careful about that.
Thank you. Man on the front row here.
Yeah, I think as a democracy, our MPs are a really important part of democracy. And, you know, we need to be trying to promote people to go into that kind of position of work, not scaring them away from it. And I also feel Transmit, you know, it's one of the biggest events in the UK. It should be a privilege to perform on that stage. And I just feel for a band to say something like that, whether it was in the past or now, and then to be given the stage, even when this press is all given, what message does that send to the youth? What message does that send to other people with maybe extreme views, that they can air their views and it's, oh, don't worry about it, you said that, it's okay, it's all forgotten, there's the stage. And I just feel that that's a bad message to be given.
Thank you. We've still to hear from Transmit on their position on this. Your views on that and everything else you hear this evening. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Let's go to our third question of the night, which comes from Grant. Grant Calder. Evening, Grant.
All right, SNP and Labour councillors have welcomed over 4,000 asylum seekers to our city, which puts additional pressures on our homelessness services. Isn't it a cheek for SNP politicians to now complain about the threat to social cohesion, given this is their policies at work?
Thank you, Grant. Glasgow has asked the Home Office to pause new arrivals of asylum seekers while they work through the backlog that they have at the moment. Catriona, Stewart, you live in Govan Hill, one of the areas that asylum seekers have been housed in. Is there a threat to social cohesion, do you think, at the moment?
I think we need to be really, really careful when we're discussing this not to scapegoat asylum seekers and refugees. I think Scotland has been very good at welcoming new communities in through the doors, particularly in Glasgow. You mentioned that it's an SNP policy, it's a Westminster policy. The Home Office designated Glasgow as a dispersal city, and so we ended up having to accommodate people moving here. And actually, it's a positive thing when people's status is changed from a refugee to asylum seeker, because it means then they can work and they can become involved in the fabric of the community that they're in, and they can contribute to the tax base, which is all really positive. The problem here is structural issues. There isn't enough housing, and that is because of political inaction over many, many years, and that shouldn't be placed at the feet of new Scots, of asylum seekers and refugees. And that is exactly what Reform UK is trying to do. They are trying to come up with very simplistic, populist solutions to this kind of problem.
This was the SNP convener of the Homelessness Committee who said this. He said, we have to pause this because we can't cope at the moment.
Yes, exactly, but not because of the sort of scapegoating that's being done by Reform and by the right, because simply there isn't enough housing for everyone. And there are around 4,000 people in temporary accommodation. Not all of those are refugees and asylum seekers. I think around 1,500 are people who are just going through homelessness accommodation. But there does need to be solutions to the housing crisis. And another issue of this is that the Home Office have given tens of millions of pounds to large organisations, to contractors to try and provide housing. That housing is substandard, it doesn't work, it's not done efficiently, and this is vast sums of public money being wasted.
Thank you. Lady in the second row here, on you go.
How is it justifiable for you to say that there's a shortage of housing available when anyone that walks through any of Scotland's towns, cities, all they see is an array of vacant buildings which could be getting used for better purposes? And I was reading in a survey the other day that your average council house takes £5,000 to £10,000 to get ready for occupation. Well, you were willing to spend more than that on some boys' football phone expenses. So I don't see why you can't find the money to do that.
Okay.
Or you also have the other option of there's the economic home design that Mr. Trump's partner has came up with. It's £60,000 to build a green-friendly home. But the government seems to be smearing it because, well, it's Donald Trump's buddy, so why can we use that?
Okay, all right. Stuart Murdoch, do you think?
Well, I just want to directly answer your point. I just happened to be talking to a woman from Shelter today, just stopped me in the street, and we had a really good chat. And in the course of the conversation, she said there's 50,000 vacant properties in Scotland, across Scotland, and 40,000, she said 40,000 or so folk homeless looking for homes or in between. And we were standing there on Great Western Road, just put the two things together, you know.
The stats, now this is reading, it may be out of date, I apologise if anything I've got wrong is here, but from what I was reading, it would take 0.3 to 0.6 of Scotland's budget to have that fixed within a year.
Okay, okay. But we are where we are in terms of the numbers and the pause that the SNP have asked in Glasgow in terms of asylum numbers. Are you worried about a threat to social cohesion in the short term?
No. Me personally not. I like...
That's not what you see.
No, I just love the way that Glasgow's going. Glasgow's a green paradise. People should come and enjoy it. You know, I know it's not a paradise for everybody because folk struggle, but we are so lucky. I travel the world and I come back to Glasgow. It's an amazing place to live, and I don't see why there can't be a wee bit more room. There is room in Glasgow for, and I like the way it's going.
Man on the second row here.
Yeah, I understand all the empathy towards these individuals coming, but there's a lot of Indigenous people who don't have houses, who are living in sofa surfing, etc. And what I found really quite difficult to take was that, I'm not sure if it's Serco or one of the other third-party providers, has written to landlords and has said that if there are properties available, they will guarantee the rent for 3 years, they will pay all the repairs and maintenance for the property, and they will also give them anything else that's required during that period of time. So it's a golden handshake for landlords who've got available properties. They wouldn't be doing that for the Indigenous people who don't have houses in Glasgow, I suspect.
Fulton MacGregor?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is I think we should be very proud as a country in Scotland that we do welcome asylum seekers. People who are asylum seekers are coming from some of the most horrendous and difficult situations.
No one's questioning that, Fulton, though. It's about the resource to deal with this. The cost doubling in the next 10 years in Glasgow.
I'm coming to that, Stephen, but I do want to make the point that I don't want the conversation to move away from that part, that I think we can, whatever your political views are, and whatever your political views are on asylum, I think that we can be proud as a nation that Scotland is a welcome country and that we do welcome people who are experiencing difficulties.
Do you accept some people, though, like that man, are anxious about where this is leading?
Yeah, well, I was going to come to that. Like Stuart, I don't believe that there's any current risk to social cohesion. I don't accept that argument, but I do accept that if you take asylum seekers, it's common sense to say that that is obviously putting pressure onto services, and we need to deal with that. We need to find ways to deal with that. We need to have the investment from the UK government around these policies, but also from the Scottish government as well, in order to make sure that there is enough services for everybody. That's asylum seekers, and it's for people who are already living here in Scotland and in Glasgow. And we do need to make sure, and I think Stuart actually put it well, there needs to be room for everybody, and we need to make that happen. And that is all our job here in the panel tonight, well, at least the three politicians, but also people that are in your council chambers here in Glasgow and elsewhere across the country. We do need to make that happen.
Thank you. Man in the white top and the glasses. Yeah.
I would like to ask sort of the MSPs, well, UK government as well. I mean, we've got all this money, apparently, for refugees and for everybody else. But what about Scotland's problems? What about the homelessness, the bad streets, the bad pavements? I've just fell over, I've just broken, well, not broken, but I've just fell over because of dodgy roads that haven't been fixed in nearly 45 years. I'm 53. And these are not feeding the people properly, our own people. And all we concentrate on is everything else except for ourselves. And I think Scotland should come first.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to our money.
Paul O'Kane, Scotland should come first.
Well, look, I think on the broader issues, there's a number of...
No, answer that man's point, please.
I was just about to say there are a number of clear priorities here, and I think in terms of the point about the First Minister's summit that he held on social cohesion, the way I think to improve things is to deal with those issues in terms of public services that this gentleman's talking about, and that is about roads and pavements, and it's about our local schools, and it's about the bins, and it's about all of those issues, and they've been chronically underinvested in for 18 years for everyone from this SNP government, because councils just haven't had the money they need to be able to deliver those services. And then to go into the broader issue, I think, about asylum and immigration, for 14 years under the Conservatives, we've had a broken system that I don't think has been working effectively, either to help support and protect those who need to come to this country because they are fleeing really horrendous situations, but also when there are people who are in this country without a right to be here, they have to be removed and sent back, and there needs to be a system to do that. And the system
Glasgow
hasn't
City
been working.
Council asked to meet Home Office Minister Angela Eagle to talk about all of this. She didn't show up for the meeting.
Well, look, I think it's important that the UK government engage with all authorities across Scotland who are dealing with this.
Well, she didn't do that.
Well, look, I'm saying to you, I think it's important that she does. And I think it's important that the UK government have a lot of competing challenges in this space. For example, having to ditch the Rwanda scheme that wasn't working under the previous UK Conservative government and actually put into place systems that actually can speed up approvals or sending people back.
Thank you. Man in the red here. Yes, on you go.
Whilst I agree that a sudden demographic change can be concerning for people, so for example, if you have 4,000 different people staying in Govan, that would be a concern. But what I don't understand is that being the 6th richest nation on earth, where you have another 186 nation behind you, and we still say that we are poor enough, we can't house others. And when we hear this othering, mainly because of the reform who is in power, and at the end of the day, politicians won votes, they would like to say that othering, that our homeless people is not getting the house they need because these asylum seekers are coming. And that's something absolutely atrocious, scandalous. We can't say that, we shouldn't say that. I have been an immigrant myself, and I think Scotland has warmly embraced me. I would like others to be embraced too.
Thank you. Lady in the back row. Right at the back, yeah.
I just think the kind of common factor in the whole debates that we're talking about tonight, it was especially after this gentleman saying that he'd fallen over a broken pavement. I think, you know, did we not privatise a lot of our works, a lot of our roadworks and everything that's ground to a halt? You know, Glasgow's backed up. I drive to uni every day and it's backed up, I can't move because it's private companies. You know, it's always been profits first and people last. It's not, you know, people who are coming here from other countries. You know, we're closer to these people than half of the people making our decisions. Like, it's just an easy scapegoat for the continuing issues we have in the UK.
Thank you. Easy scapegoat, says that lady. Is she right?
Well, can I address Grant's point at the very start of the question? The SNP have been wanting to get more and more people here. It's not the fault of the people who are here. My parents were immigrants, and they came into this country in a legal manner, and I have been very fortunate to be born in this country and raised here. The problem we have, and it's just down the road in Drumchapel Health Centre cannot cope. It is unable to see the patients it's got. If you come here and you're an asylum seeker, you probably don't speak English, which means that it takes double or triple the amount of time for you to get seen. That's not the fault of the individual. It's the fault of the SNP government, who have chronically underfunded the Scottish Health Service. We have a Glasgow City Council who are not cleaning our streets, who are not cleaning up graffiti, who are not filling our potholes. They are now in a position
But immigration is
where,
a reserved matter. It's the Home Office that is sending people to Scotland. It's not the SNP government.
The SNP's policy has always been to bring as many people here as possible. That's what they talk
But
about
they don't have
all the
control
time.
over immigration.
It's what
It's
they
the
talk
Home
about
Office.
all the time. Glasgow wanted people to come here. As I keep saying, it's not the fault of the individual. It's the fault of the government for underfunding everything that we have going on, which means that people who are citizens of this country are unable to see their GP. People who are citizens of this country are unable to get housing in the way that they should do. Our services are chronically underfunded by this SNP government, and that is what's causing our massive issue here.
Okay. You can feel the concern in the room around this. So in 6 weeks' time, we're doing a special programme here in Glasgow, looking at some of the challenges facing the city at the moment. Critics have suggested Glasgow is in a state of decline at the moment. Is that how you feel about it? Come along and have your say. Go to the website bbc.co.uk/debate night and join us for that special programme in 6 weeks' time from Glasgow about the state of the city and the challenges it faces right now. We've got time for one more question here tonight in Glasgow, and it comes from Christine Murdoch. Evening, Christine.
Is Stuart Hunter, the Scottish Secretary Teachers Association, correct when he says that Scottish education is broken? And if so, how do we fix it?
Thank you. These are new comments today saying we've passed the tipping point leading to crisis, down to bureaucracy and also record numbers of children with additional support needs. Sandesh Gulhane, is education in Scotland broken?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Scotland was a world leader. I was born in London, and when people from Scotland came to university, we thought, oh my God, how amazing is that? It's not the case anymore. 450 teachers were laid off in Glasgow, and yet the SNP government sent money elsewhere for education. We are unable to look after our deaf children. Our deaf children are mainstreamed, which is fine, but they need some additional help. They're not getting it. We are not looking after any of our pupils in the way we should. And the Labour government sticking a 20% tax on private schools, all that does is mean people will leave that private sector.
There's no evidence of that.
And they're going to go into the state sector.
There's been no evidence of that.
It's only just started. It's class war. That's all this is. And so what we need to see is our higher universities looked after. They're chronically underfunded when it comes to people who are citizens of our country wanting to go. Lots of Scots go down to England because they can't get a place here because the Scottish government have capped the number of Scots that can come here.
Well, what about schools? What's the answer in schools? How do you fix something that's broken?
We need teachers. We need teachers. We need to reduce the violence in our schools. A 12-year-old was stabbed in Aberdeen. We need to reduce the violence in schools. We need our teachers back. We need to start looking after our pupils, and we need to start valuing education and really pushing the boundaries that we have here, because, my God, Scots are world leaders. Forever they have been world leaders, and we can be again, but we need to invest in our education system.
Women in the black in the front row.
I just want to kind of highlight a thing that's come up in general, and I think being someone that's sort of involved in politics in general and actually enjoys politics, and particularly Scottish politics, is constantly we're hearing from politicians time and time again, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. Turn to yourself, take a bit of responsibility, and actually say to people what your plan is, and not a plan, and no offence, but change. You know, that was Labour's full campaign last year. We're going to change, we're going to change. You've kept the two-child cap.
We tax private schools at 20%. You know, if we're talking about education, Sandesh clearly doesn't agree with, for example, taxing schools
but right
at 20%.
now, you've just literally proven my point of turning around and going,
No,
blaming someone else.
I just showed you that a Labour policy on education of taxing private schools 20% in order to invest in education is a solution that can be used in terms of the finance of this. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. But, you know, like, it's constantly people are hearing time and time again, it's somebody else's fault, and I just think politicians actually need to take a bit of time. And I know myself as a voter, if I asked a politician a question, rather than getting given an answer which actually doesn't answer the question, I would rather say, I don't know, and I'll come back to you and I'll find out on it. And constantly on panels like this, it's blaming other people rather than turning yourself and taking responsibility.
There's the challenge from that lady, without blaming anybody else, Fulton MacGregor. If you hear that Scottish education is broken from Scotland's second biggest teaching union, what are you going to do about it?
I don't believe that it is broken. I believe that it faces challenges, and I believe that it faces really difficult challenges just now that education is facing across the board, particularly post-pandemic. I go out to schools every week. Just this week, just on Monday, I was at Coatbridge High and Old Monkland Primary School in my constituency. And what I see time and time again is teachers who are doing an absolutely fantastic job.
Nobody doubts that.
No, I'm not saying that. Teachers are doing a fantastic job, and children and pupils who are engaging really, really well. This week, for example, I was at Coatbridge High, as I say, and they were doing construction courses, and I got to go around 3 or 4 of them to see what they were doing. The kids were totally engaged, and it was great to see lots of young girls involved too, breaking down those stereotypes. So that's what I see when I go out. Now, when I speak to the teachers, they tell me there is additional challenges just now. Some of those have been raised. They're around additional support needs.
40% rise in the number of children with additional support needs in Scotland. Why is that?
Well, I think it's an issue across the board. I think the pandemic has certainly played a part in that, but I think it was something that was on the rise anyway, and we do need to rise to meet those challenges. Now, we do have an Education Secretary in Jenny O'Gilruth, who has been very open about the challenges, who's been very open with the country, with the Parliament, and has been trying to take the situation forward. And I think that we do need to meet it in that vein. I don't think we can be in a situation where we can say, you know, blame this person, blame that person. We shouldn't be doing that. I agree with the lady at the front, but we do need to be balanced about it. I don't think that education is broken in Scotland, but I think that it is facing challenges.
When you said that, people laughed. So let's go to the audience. Lady nodding there, the blonde hair. Yes, on you go.
Well, I think there lies the problem when we have people who don't think the system is broken. So how can we fix something we don't believe is broken? Is it time for us to take on the Finnish model, where they recognised in the government that their system was broken and it went from one of the worst education systems to one of the best? And on the point of ASN, yes, you did say that there's a rise, but there's also been a decrease in the amount of funding being given. So how can we meet the needs of young people of our society today when we talk about getting it right for every child? We certainly aren't.
Catriona, Stewart, you're a former education correspondent. Is education in Scotland broken?
A former education correspondent and also children's panel member, so I see this in the round. And, you know, it's interesting, Fulton, that you say that we shouldn't point fingers, because you are the only person we could point a finger to, because the SNP has been in charge of education in Scotland for such a length of time. There have been repeated reviews that have suggested really good ideas for remodelling education in this country. Most recently, we had the Hayward Review. It's been thrown out. None of the suggestions there are being taken forward. But we have a model of education that's been in place since the 1800s. It's not serving young people who have far different needs. We are still teaching to the test. We still have young people who are being pushed through modules. There's this constant just shove forward to get kids through exams, and it doesn't work for all young people. And when you're mainstreaming classes where you have 40 to 50% of young people with additional support needs, there needs to be extra bodies in the classroom. There needs to be extra adults in the classroom who are supporting these young people, because the kids who are at the top of the class are being held back. The young people who are at the bottom of the class who need that extra help are being left behind, and it just doesn't work for anybody.
Okay, we're short on time yet. We're short on time. Stuart, what do we do?
What do we do? Well, I've got 2 kids with additional support needs. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that the schools aren't the schools of 40 years ago. I think we've made huge leap forwards. It's not so much that there's more kids needing, it's that these needs are being addressed.
Recognised, yeah.
They're being recognised.
Do your kids get the support they need?
They do. They're hanging on by their fingernails. They're hard work. And we love our teachers because they're still there. The kids are still there. Now, I'm a musician. Get musicians into the schools, get artists into the schools, get theatre people into the schools. Bring real people into the school to show the kids about real life, because all these exams, it doesn't suit everybody. You know that.
Paul O'Kane.
Look, I think we need to fundamentally listen to teachers and to parents, and I think that's what's important in terms of the solutions that we can offer. My mum was a teacher for 40 years, so she has quite a lot to say to me about education. I think we have a real challenge in our classrooms in terms of making sure the right support is round about our young people, and that the right funding is in place for local authorities to be able to deliver for every child who is in the care of schools. We have a presumption to mainstream in this country, which I think is a really important thing, that young people who have additional support needs are with their peers in schools. The problem is that it hasn't been properly funded. So we aren't getting the right PSA, pupil support assistance, we're not getting the right additional support in a lot of schools. And fundamentally, we can't get away from the point that Catriona makes, that the SNP have been in charge for 18 years, and therefore it has been their decisions which has led us to where we are now. And let's be honest, John Swinney was the Education Secretary in this country who actively chose to downgrade the marks of working class children. That is unforgivable and unacceptable. We need to change that.
All right, I want to finish with the audience. We've got parents, we've got teachers in the audience. Man in the green top there in the second row. Yes, on you go.
Well, I agree the system's definitely broken. I've got to disagree with the Conservative MSP there, that I think the Labour policy on private school tax, probably one of the first actual substantial policies we've had here, is generating more income to have more teachers in schools. That's exactly what we need.
Thank you. A man in the black polo shirt here. Yeah, on you go. On you go, yep.
Catriona mentioned about reviews of education. Who are these people that made the reviews? Because everybody thinks throwing money at it. I mean, do these people send their children to private schools? I don't know. Are they nameless people? My daughters were at primary school in the 90s, and I thought their education was first class. I really did.
Thank you.
I believe I have a granddaughter now, and she's at school, and I think they do a very good job. I don't accept that it's broken. I accept what you said. It has challenges.
Okay. Good to end on a positive note this evening. Your experiences from home as well. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. And that's it from us for tonight here in Govan. Next week, we're going to be in Perth. The week after that, for the first time, in St Andrews. If you want to come along to those shows, just go to the website, bbc.co.uk/debate night. If you missed any of tonight's programme, we're on a bit later, repeated on BBC One Scotland, or you can watch any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel here tonight, Coughing, Catriona, Stewart. Get well soon. And to our audience here in Govan, it's always great to be with you here, and to you at home for watching. We'll see you next week in Perth. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night.